Uh, Hello, good morning, and Om Shanti. So, welcome back. We'll start with quickly recalling what we discussed yesterday. So, Soul Spa, as this residential retreat which we planned is called, we wanted to share a collection of tools so that you can experience relaxation and rejuvenation. And self-talk is one of the most important tools of the Soul Spa. We discussed yesterday, every situation has two components: the facts in the situation, the story I tell myself about those facts. And the very interesting part and the very interesting part is our experience and our emotional reaction is more than 90% of the times not based on the facts in the situation, but on the story I tell myself about those facts. And the interesting part about this aspect is, to a large extent, if I can transform or change the story I'm telling myself, then I can change the experience without changing the reality, because I can't change the reality. The facts remain the facts. If I want to change my reality, change my experience of that same reality, I should learn to change the story I'm telling myself. And self-talk is the story that I tell myself based on my beliefs. The most empowering thing about this technique of self-talk is I can change my story and thus my beliefs with awareness and practice. Very, very important. First, I need to know, and I need to consistently and persistently do in order to experience the benefit. Today, I'm going to share about how self-talk impacts our worldview and how our worldview or the perspective that we have towards the world can make a difference between our success and failure and what research talks about it. I will also share about the role of self-compassion in transforming our self-talk and making it more positive, and what is the impact of the self-talk on brain, and some fascinating research that has been done in the last couple of decades in this area, and how self-talk can change the physical structure of the brain. I'll share that with you. And towards the end, we will also explore the relationship between self-talk and meditation. So that's what I have in store for you over the course of next 70 to 75 minutes. Now, whatever happens in the world, I interpret those based on my worldview, which is dependent on my beliefs. Yesterday, we also discussed how beliefs are the invisible cognitive filters through which we filter the world or whatever is happening in the world. And based on my worldview, I start understanding or interpreting the situation. And based on my understanding will be my reaction. So most of the times we think that we reacted to the situation. No, we do not react to a situation. We react to our understanding of the situation. If we want to change the reaction, then we need to learn to change our understanding. And if we want to change our understanding, we need to change the way we look at the world. And Martin Seligman, is a very famous psychologist from US, and based on his research on how people think and what kind of worldviews they develop, what is the result that they see in their life based on their worldview, is some interesting research that he has done, where he says optimists and pessimists shape their stories of the world very differently based on their explanatory style. Yesterday, we discussed how in any situation, and today also in the beginning we said, in any situation, there are facts and there is a story I tell myself. And the story that I tell myself depends on my explanatory style. That is, based on my explanatory style, which has three components: permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. In a minute, let us explore what these three components are from an optimist perspective and from a pessimist perspective. Permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. Pessimists tell themselves that bad events will last a long time or forever. I'll never get this done. Like, for example, if you have a pessimist friend who lost his investments in the stock market in the last 1 week, if he's a pessimist, he would say he will never recover. That's it. The market is, has gone to dogs. It has hit rock bottom. It's going to take years for it to come back. And they tell themselves that these bad events are universal, or whatever is happening to them, they attribute it to the whole world. I can't trust any of these people, even though it happened because of just one or two people. And they also tell that it is their own fault. Whatever bad event has happened, it is because of their own fault. That is, I am terrible at this. Now, this is the explanatory style that they use in order to do this kind of negative self-talk with themselves. Now, let's explore what optimists tell themselves. They tell themselves that bad events are temporary. That is, if you have an optimist friend who also lost his savings, or his investments are not doing well because of the recent stock market crash, he would recall what happened in 2008 and how the markets bounced back, and how this coronavirus is a temporary phenomena, and as the summer peaks, hopefully the cases should come down drastically, and in next 6 to 8 weeks things should start coming back to normal. So optimists tell themselves that bad events are temporary, that happens occasionally, but it's not a big deal. The bad events have a specific cause and aren't universal. When the weather is better, that won't be a problem. And they want to whack themselves. It does not mean that optimists are irresponsible. It means that they are realistic in terms of considering how much of the situation is the result of their own actions, which is in their own control, and how much of the happening is beyond their control. I'm good at this, but today wasn't my lucky day. And what Martin Seligman found was, when you shift your explanatory style from pessimistic to optimistic, this is another very interesting and important insight to all of you. It does not mean we are always condemned to be pessimistic. If we are pessimistic, or if we have pessimistic explanatory style, we can change. When we change our explanatory style from pessimistic to optimistic, it not only makes you feel better, it also makes you become grittier. Grittier means more resilient and much stronger in any given situation. And what he did was, he did a very simple research. He tried to look at the explanatory style used by 12 National League teams. Okay. And statistically, after his research, what he saw was, in 1986, optimistic teams bettered their 1985 win-loss records, and pessimistic teams did worse than they had in 1985. It gets more interesting. Teams optimistic in 1985 hit well under pressure in 86, whereas hitting of teams pessimistic in 85 fell apart under pressure in 1986 compared to how well both kinds of teams normally hit. Let me explain what exactly happened. In 1985, based on what different teams have spoken about their own win-loss, Martin Seligman categorized the teams into optimistic teams and pessimistic teams. This he did in the end of 1985. And all through 1986, they observed the performance of the optimistic teams and pessimistic teams. And during 1986, what they found was teams that were optimistic based on their own quotes. Quote means what they shared in 1985, they performed well under pressure. And those teams which were categorized as pessimistic, they fell apart under pressure. And the interesting part is the teams never knew which team was categorized as optimistic, which team was categorized as pessimistic. Very important. Now, Seligman repeated the same study with 1986 basketball player quotes and again predicted achievement for 1987. With baseball player, basically he started with baseball players, then he repeated that with in 87, and then he extended it to basketball. And this was not by chance. Optimistic explanatory style predicted success. And if you're interested in learning little more about this research, you can surf on the net, or you can also read this book, which gives some very interesting insights about the science behind the established beliefs that we have been conditioned to believe since our childhood. It's a very interesting book, Barking Up the Wrong Tree. That's where I picked up this relevant example about how the explanatory style of the stories we tell ourselves influence our performance given all other things being the same. And just by changing the explanatory style, that is, just by changing our self-talk, transforming the negative self-talk into positive self-talk, we can actually perform a lot better, even in most difficult situations, than when we have negative self-talk. And when we are trying to speak with ourselves, like we discussed yesterday, a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves are self-critical. That is, we kick ourselves black and blue if and ever we do any mistake or something wrong happens. Take the simple example. If any of your classmates or your close friends, they failed in an exam and they come to you, what will you tell them? All of you must have had that experience. What will you tell them? You're not going to tell them, yeah, if you don't read, if you goof up, this is what will happen. Pay the price. Go have fun. Will you say this? Or will you say, yeah, things happen. It's okay. You tried your best. There's always another opportunity. This is not the end of the world. Don't feel disheartened. Let me see how I can help you. What are those areas that you are weak? Let's start working on those. Or will you say this? Now, compare what you are going to tell your best friend to what you are going to tell yourself when you failed or when you did a mistake. Will you be compassionate to yourself? Normal circumstance, we don't. 99% of the time, we whack ourselves black and blue. We kick ourselves and we talk so much negativity and we give such big labels. And this is exactly what happens when the stress response is turned inwards. If there is an external threat, you either fight it or you run away from it or you freeze. Basically, you just stand there because you don't know what to do. These are the typical three responses of stress. Like, what is the freezing? What does freeze mean? In our normal language, sometimes if your CEO asks you to stand up in the middle of a 1,000-member company or a middle of all your employees, and he starts asking you a question, for the first few seconds, you will go completely blank because you are shocked that CEO picked you up in the middle of 1,000 people, that too in a town hall, and starts asking you questions. And when you are asked after the experience, when your friends ask you, your colleagues ask you, you'll say, yeah, I was completely blank. I don't know. I mean, I was just sitting there, and then this guy calls my name, and it took some time for me to understand it was me he was addressing. I went completely blank. So that is the situation which the scientists call it as freeze. Now, these three aspects of our stress response, when we turn it inward, what happens is trying to fight it out becomes self-criticism. We become so critical, we start calling ourselves labels. You are stupid. You should have spent more time. You knew he was going to ask that question. What would have happened if you would have paid a little more attention, did a little more homework? You're always like this. You are lousy. You will never grow, because this is self criticism. And the flight is basically you move away from the situation, you apply leave, and then you isolate yourself. And even when you isolate for weeks together or months together, depending on the kind of personality you are, you will continue to ruminate. Ruminate means keep thinking about the same negative experience again and again and again. So this is the stress response that happens when we turn it inward. But self compassion is one method for handling ourselves and our emotions during stress. Instead of fighting, you replace that. Instead of self criticism, you replace that with self kindness. Very important. And instead of isolating yourself, you will relate with rest of the people and say, yes, things do happen. Sometimes people do make mistakes. It's not only me, even others will make. That's fine. I will take this as an opportunity to learn and improve. So that is identifying yourself and then saying that you are not the only one who is going through this sorrow. There are others in the world who also are going through this sorrow. And third, instead of freezing, you put that through mindfulness. That is the practice of meditation where you make yourself present, and instead of blaming yourself, you will allow the emotional dust storm to pass. Let's explore each one of these in a little more detail. At the root of all kinds of psychological stress that we experience, whenever we experience, at the root is something called resistance. Now, what does that resistance mean? It refers to the struggle that occurs when we believe our moment to moment experience should be other than it is. I'll pause here and encourage you to read it again and reflect on it. That is, we are saying, yes, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए था. This should not have happened like this. Why does it happen only to me? Why is it that at that particular instant only it always happens to me? I am the only one who is picked up. No, it should not happen like that. So this resistance creates a lot of psychological stress. And if you want to remove that resistance, learn to accept without becoming judgmental and being kind with yourself. Acknowledge the mistake and accept it. Acceptance means not only acknowledging the mistake, but also saying you have the capability to overcome it or correct it. So, self acceptance is the foundation of self kindness. When this resistance melts away and you are accepting whatever is the situation, that is the root or the foundation for us being kind to ourselves. Very simple. What is self-kindness in action? Telling myself, may I accept myself as I am. May I begin to accept myself as I am. May I forgive myself. May I be strong. May I be patient. I'm switching on my video. Let's do a small exercise where I want each one of you, wherever you are, to hug yourself, both your hands, as if you're hugging yourself, and repeat this. May I be healthy. May I be loveful. May I be successful. May I be happy. If there any situation that you are currently facing and you made a mistake and you're trying to come out of it, repeat this. Keep hugging yourself. May I accept myself as I am. May I begin to accept myself as I am. May I forgive myself. May I love myself. Gently rub your palms and wipe your eyes. Thank you. So, when we start becoming less self-critical and more self-accepting, it becomes easy for us to be kind to ourselves. And why is this self-compassion important? Because self-compassion is like a good coach. Without harsh criticism, but with kindness, support, and understanding, we can come out of our situation. And this is what we look for when we rush to our best friends whenever we face any tough situation. And in current times, if the best friend is far away and they are not available, it is good for us to practice this self-compassion always so that you can become your own best friend and you can coach yourself with kindness, support, and understanding. And it's very important that we accept the facts in the situation without resisting. That is, we drop the idea what we think the reality should be and be open to what it is. This means when we are suffering, we can let go of the story of what is happening and simply be with it. That is, allow the emotional dust storm to pass. That is, you are acknowledging that you are feeling painful, but you are not trying to create stories around that pain, but telling yourself that this is not permanent. This too will pass. I understand this failure is painful, but I will overcome it. And you do that with courage and presence. And that's where the third aspect of self-compassion, self-kindness, common humanity, that is identifying or accepting that you are not the only one who's unlucky or going through this pain. There are others also who fail once in a while. So there's nothing wrong with you per se. And the third one is mindfulness or the presence. Because there are two kinds of networks that are active in our brain at any point of time. One is called as default mode network or called as narrative network, which is most of the time active, where we keep talking to ourselves without even being aware of it. That's what we call a self-talk. And the second part of the second kind of a network is what we call as a direct experience network. That is, when you are trying to just experience the world around through your physical senses. That is the direct experience network. That is, for example, if you are standing there on the beach in the evening and experiencing the cool breeze without thinking about anything, but just trying to feel that cool breeze, how it is hitting your cheeks, how it is hitting your face, and how cold and relaxed you're feeling. So focusing on that direct experience get is what activates the direct experience network. But most of the time, it is our default mode network that is active, because the default mode network creates a sense of self. It projects that self into past or future, and most importantly, it looks for problems by default. That is why if we just sit like that, most of the time we think only negative. But when you start practicing meditation, when you start practicing mindfulness, what happens is, when you are trying to become conscious and present yourself in the moment, you are temporarily switching off the default mode network. Very interesting. That's why even yesterday we said, with awareness and with practice, I can change my self talk. I never said it is easy, but it is simple and possible. Very important. There's a big difference between being simple and being easy. Simple means there is nothing complicated about it. Easy means you don't have to put effort. Self talk is simple, it is not easy. Because, and another interesting data point for you so that you don't get disappointed, it is difficult only in the beginning for the first few days. Once you get a hang of it and you start practicing it, it becomes more and more natural, and it starts becoming easier and easier. And the return that you are going to get is hundreds of orders of magnitude more than the effort you have invested. Because once you practice this positive self talk, you can completely transform your life. So, this is just a one time investment. Okay, so that is how meditation helps. Now, let's explore how self talk impacts our brain. Yes, repeatedly, if we repeat the same set of thoughts again and again, those set of thoughts can actually change the physical structure of the brain. Yesterday, you saw that the piano players, when they were asked to just think about moving their fingers without actually moving the fingers every day for 15 minutes in 5 days, even just thinking about moving the fingers changed the corresponding areas inside the brain which handle the stimulus from these fingers. Now, are you able to see my cursor? So here, this is the emotional brain and this is the thinking brain. The number of connections from the emotional brain to the thinking brain are far higher compared with the number of connections from the thinking brain to the emotional brain, typically for most of us. What it means is, when, how much, let me explain this in a simple question. How much time does it take for you to get angry? Be honest. How much time does it take for you to come to your normal state after becoming angry? Depending on the situation, you will say, Bala, sometimes that anger never subsides. So we agree that the amount of effort it takes to become emotional is far less compared with the amount of time it takes for us to come back to our base level and calm ourselves down. That is because of how our brain itself is wired, because of the conditioning since childhood. But we don't have to get disappointed. What research shows is, positive self-talk, when you do it on a regular basis and consistently, persistently you do it, then the number of connections from the thinking brain to your emotional brain will also start increasing. That is, it becomes easier and easier for your logical brain or your rational mind to take over your emotional mind. That is, through positive self talk, you can actually make your gray matter stronger and your thinking brain stronger. Now, let's see how this self talk is actually employed by the US Army in US Navy in terms of training their Navy SEALs. Rohit, thank you. So as no. Let it. Okay, just play that. Yeah, just yeah. Thanks. Okay. So what you saw in the video is basically, let me explain. The emotional center of the brain, amygdala, when it fires up because of fear, you get into a state of panic where your ability to think goes out of the window. But when you start doing self-talk, um, okay, so when you start doing self-talk, then the control is taken over from amygdala to the frontal lobes. That is, what we call as the anterior cingulate works as a fulcrum between the emotional brain and frontal brain. If your emotions take over, then you are scared, you panic, and then you give up, like the way it has happened for those Navy SEALs when they're about to drown, or when their ability to breathe is interrupted. But with self-talk, when they remind themselves that they are not going to die because the instructor is always there, it is just a little bit of discomfort they are going to face, and it is not fatal. When they try to do this self-talk, the control from their amygdala, that is the emotional brain, shifted to their frontal lobes, that is our thinking brain. And when this happens, because your panic reduces, you will be in control and you will be able to think through clearly. I'll share a very interesting experience that I had in December. uh, with some of my friends. I was visiting Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and as a part of that, we wanted to go underwater to actually see the reef, which is underwater. uh, and if you had to go underwater, they'll give you a little bit of training, a little bit of instruction, and you have to wear a complete swimsuit and you have to breathe with your mouth. You are not supposed to breathe with your nose. And breathing with our mouth is not something that comes to us naturally. Even though they allow us to practice for 10-15 minutes and allow us to get inside the water and come up, what I understood or what I practiced is this self talk. I kept telling myself that the instructor is there, he is going to pull me out. At the most, what's going to happen is a little bit of water is going to go inside. I should not be breathing with my nose. I should continue to breathe with my mouth. And anytime I feel uncomfortable, I can always go up, breathe with my nose, once again put that rubber into the mouth, and then basically how you start breathing from the oxygen mask that they give you. So you need to put that inside your mouth and you should start breathing with your mouth. So this self talk helped me a lot in terms of not panicking and at the same time really enjoy the underwater scenery of the Great Barrier Reef. And when I came out, I actually shared this with the instructor because he was not familiar with this concept of self-talk. He was giving all other physical precautions, but he did not tell us anything about what we should think and how we should train our mind. And when we did that as a group, we were definitely far more successful and less panicky compared with the other groups. And that's what the instructor told us. And he promised us that he is going to include this self-talk concept as a part of his instructions from next time onwards. So it, the self-talk is that powerful. You can switch control from your emotional and unthinking brain to your rational and thinking brain. And that is what they are helping the Navy SEALs do. And after that, after training them on this arousal control through breathing and through positive self-talk and through visualization and through goal setting, four techniques, they saw 25% more people qualify the pool test as compared with the past where they were not teaching these four techniques. So when you are normal, this is how your frontal lobes or the prefrontal cortex works. But when your amygdala is completely emotional and it gets panicky, the control that the prefrontal cortex has on rest of our being, it completely goes out of the window. So this is what happens. So in pool comp, this is what was happening to the recruits, and through self-talk they were trying to move them to this state so that they can remember the instructions of how to untangle all these knots that these their equipment is put through, how they can untangle it and then safely start breathing again. Now, another very interesting example, in a couple of minutes I'm going to share this very interesting insight to show you how self-talk, if you consistently practice it, can actually change the physical structure of the brain. OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. That is, it mm, uh, mm, very few people are afflicted, but it is those people who are afflicted by this, they are obsessed by certain actions and they keep repeating them. Like for example, if that person is obsessed about germs and germs infecting the hands, they will continuously keep washing every few minutes. It is not that they don't know they haven't washed, but still, because their emotional circuit, or what we call as the error detection circuit, has gone for a toss, they continuously keep going back and then keep washing their hands, or they keep continuously wiping their desk, or they continuously keep going back to the home to check whether they locked the room properly or not. So there are many such obsessions. But what scientists have found very interestingly is, in an OCD patient, what happens is, typically for normal people like us, whenever we notice something different or something fearful in the environment, our error detection circuit, it it gets switched on, and then we start feeling bad and we start taking the necessary steps to overcome that fear. Like for example, if you saw a dog which is after you, immediately your brain detects it, and your stress hormones are released by amygdala, and you start running. And after you have run and you no longer see the dog, or somebody has already come and then caught the dog, you will calm down. Very important. And that calming down or switching off this error detection circuit is done by another small piece of the brain called caudate nucleus. That is, error detection or whatever is danger. Whatever is danger is sensed by this error detection circuit, and once the danger passes, this caudate nucleus switches off that that error detection circuit. Then things become normal. But in OCD patients, what happens is, like all of us, they will also detect that something is wrong, but their ability to switch it off after the event has passed malfunctions. That is, it does not function properly. And what scientists have found, as there's this guy called Jeffrey Schwartz. If you're interested, you can read his books or drop us an email and I'll send more material. Jeffrey Schwartz, that's the name of the scientist who did groundbreaking research. And what he found was, when he can train the OCD patients with self-talk. That is, once they wash hands, as soon as they get this urge to wash again, he trained them to say, this urge is the false alarm that is coming up because of incorrect functioning of my error detection circuit. There is nothing wrong with my hands. I just washed them. It is not needed for me to wash again. And this, they do it, this repetition, they forcefully hold themselves from washing the hands, and they keep repeating this self-talk. And they do this day after day, week after week, month after month. And within few months, what the doctor saw was the OCD symptoms have come down more than 50 to 60%. And for some people, by consistently using this concept of self talk, they were able to get rid of their OCD symptoms fully. And this is something really remarkable, because until this research, scientists never believed that just by thinking you can change the structure of the brain, especially one very important area of the brain like caudate nucleus and its functioning. But he proved that through positive self-talk, through by being consistently, persistently giving positive instructions and empowering instructions to you, you can change the internal functioning of the brain. And today, the world over, in addition to the drugs, this positive self-talk is one of the most important therapies that is used by the OCD therapists in treating the OCD patients. So what we tell ourselves, do not ignore it just like that. It is not the mindless chatter, but it has power to even change the physical functioning of our brain. So this is yet another powerful example of how profound the self talk is, and how it impacts different aspects of our physical health and our mental health. And in order to help the OCD patients, he came up with these 4 steps. First one is relabel. That is, as soon as they get this urge to wash their hands, they instead of saying that I feel like washing my hands, they are taught to relabel it. That is, they are going to tell themselves that this urge to wash is coming because of my incorrect brain circuit. And then they reattribute it. That is, this urge is happening because this particular area of brain is not functioning properly for me. And then they refocus on they having washed their hands. That is, they consciously and purposefully remove their focus from their hands and washing to this to this particular activity that they have already washed, and they are safe and nothing is going to happen to them. So that is the refocus aspect. And then after they do this, they reevaluate. That is, constantly they keep telling themselves that it is not required for you to simply follow through to this brain impulse that is forcing you to wash your hands. By making, by talking to yourself, you can make the brain work properly. You can pass on the control to your thinking brain, and everything is going to be normal. So the 4 steps: relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue the whole experience is exactly the same that we can use in any situation or scenario. Instead of calling something the bad that happened to you as everlasting, relabel it. You say, I am not a failure, I just failed in this one instance. Reattribute. Check what are all the other things that are causing or that have caused that particular failure to you. Instead of attributing everything to yourself, then refocus. That is, start focusing on what you can learn and what is it that you can gain from that particular situation, rather than cursing yourself. And then periodically reevaluate the whole experience after it passes, and start seeing it from a different perspective, not necessarily negative. So relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue. These are the 4 steps that you can follow as a part of your self-talk. And how do I implement this self-talk? What are the ways in which I can use them? What are the different methods of self-talk? One is silent self-talk. That is, whatever thoughts are going inside your mind, you are trying to become aware and become conscious of that. Second one is self speak. That is, whatever positive thoughts that you want to think, you are going to verbalize those. That is, you are going to use your mouth and then speak whatever positive thoughts you want to make, speak them out. Things are going to be okay. Bala, you're absolutely fine. You're not going to die. You are alive. Your instructor is there. This is not the end of the world. So you self speak. And another interesting technique is self conversation. What the self conversation means is you you become the you answer, you ask a question and you only answer the question. That is, both sides of the conversation, you only switch sides. If you come up with something, what will others think if I fail? What will happen to my reputation? And then you have the conversation with yourself. Bala, come on, don't think too much. Nobody is going to remember this mistake that you have done 10 years hence, so it's okay, nothing will happen. So I am only asking the question and I am only answering the question. So self conversation is having the self talk by holding both sides of the conversation and making it more empowering. And another interesting way is to write down your thoughts. You know, as a coach and as a counselor in our company, there are many people who contact me whenever they are going through some kind of a distress or some kind of an anxiety in our office. And one of the things that I always teach them is to write down their thoughts. Because for some of you, if you're also suffering from this problem of overthinking, which seems to be increasing in the world now with all the fear and anxiety, learn to write the things down. Because by writing it, you slow down your thinking. When you just sit there and think, it might not happen. But when you speak, when you write, you automatically slow down your thinking. And when you write, it is easier for you to review all of them rather than trying to review them inside your brain, inside your mind, because our working memory is very, very small. And tape talk. The another thing that you can do is to speak and then tape it, and then try to listen to your own self talk periodically. Some kind of positive thoughts that you yourself can tape with your own voice, and you yourself can listen to them on a daily basis. So that is tape talk. So there are 5 things: silent self talk, self speak, self conversation, self write, and tape talk. The 5 and another 5A model, how do I change, which I have been sharing with you all along. I'll just run through those 5 steps. First, become aware. Second, acknowledge the need for change. Third, as we discussed, self acceptance is the root for self kindness. Accept that you are fallible and you can change. Very, very important. That and is very important. It's not a but it is an and. That is, I am not my mind. I am the master of my mind. I control my thoughts. I can control my mind. So you accept that you are fallible and you can change. And then you analyze the situation, focusing on the facts and not on your story. That is what is called as becoming non judgmental. When you move your thinking to focusing on the facts and not necessarily the story, you start detaching yourself from the situation and you will start looking at what exactly has happened. And that is what is the 4th step of analyzing it. And then once you analyze, only then you start acting in a new way. Most of our new year resolutions, most of you might have taken up one or a few resolutions, and some of you might have even forgotten those. The reason is we jump from awareness to action without going through these 3 steps. And the most crucial step is acceptance, because when you accept, you move from a position of fear, anxiety, and weakness to a position of strength, courage, and compassion. So that acceptance helps you to move into the position of strength. And from the position of strength, when you analyze, you won't panic. And once you analyze, you put in the measures to correct yourself. And the greatest gift that you can give yourself is to use the self talk and release yourself from any of your painful past. Okay, that's the 5A model of transformation using self talk: becoming aware, acknowledging the need for change, accepting that yes, you made the mistake and you can change, analyzing without becoming judgmental, and acting in the new way. Now, how does meditation help? It comes from the Latin word called meditatio, meaning to think, to contemplate, and ponder. So that's there are many definitions of meditation. One of those is this. Meditation is self-introspection in a relaxed state. What does it mean? Reflect means you need to speak with yourself with love. Very important. Relaxation and speaking oneself with love are the two most important ingredients of meditation. Instead of seeing yourself as a bag of weaknesses, you will change your perspective. Because when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. That is, if you look at yourself as a bag of weaknesses, you will see only weaknesses. But if you look at yourself as a bundle of virtues, you will start seeing virtues. You will start seeing all your hidden strengths and treasures. For example, practicing yourself, telling yourself that I'm a special child of God. And meditation is dwelling on the nature of divine. To dwell is to think, to reflect. For most people, meditation is just a relaxation technique, but in reality, it's not just a relaxation technique. It is a way of being and of seeing, resting on a foundation of deep inquiry into nature of self and offering the potential for liberation from small-mindedness of self-preoccupation. That is, consciously you generate positive thoughts by overcoming the negative self-talk that comes naturally to us when we sit for meditation, but you consciously change that negative self-talk into something positive and meditate on those positive qualities. So that is the meaning of meditation. And how does this kind of meditation transform self-talk? Because when you are in a relaxed fashion, when you consciously think positive with lots of love and compassion and kindness, it helps you to remove all the unproductive and untrue conditioning. Through the practice of soul consciousness, which we will do in few minutes, you start realizing your own true potential. And by having empowering conversations with yourself, very, very important, both positive, loveful, and empowering conversations will actually change your mood and your state of mind from feeling like a victim to feeling like a creator. Because that is what in turn will help improve your Swaman. Swaman is the respect that we give to ourselves and thus our self-esteem. Good. If you are ready, I will switch on my video once again. I would encourage all of you to sit straight, have your back well supported, don't fold your arms, keep them on the chair or on your thighs, have both feet firmly on the ground. If you feel comfortable, you can keep your eyes open or you can keep your eyes closed, whichever way you feel comfortable. If you keep your eyes open, focus your eyes on something and just something in front of you and relax yourself. Gently bring your attention to your breathing. Breathe deeply and slowly. As you breathe in, observe the muscles of your stomach expand. As you breathe out, observe the muscles of your stomach contract. Breathe deeply and slowly. Even if your mind goes elsewhere, gently acknowledge the thought, ignore it, and bring your attention back to your breathing. As you breathe deeply and slowly, visualize a shining bright white star in the middle of your forehead. A shining bright white star in the middle of your forehead. This shining bright white star is spreading the rays of peace and relaxation through all parts of my face. As these white rays of peace and relaxation pass through my face, I feel relaxed. My facial muscles let go of any tension and they feel relaxed. As the white rays of peace from the shining bright white star pass through my neck, my shoulders, my chest, my hands, my back, and my stomach, my complete upper body relaxes. Every cell of my upper body is shining brightly by emanating white rays of peace and relaxation into the room around me. As these white rays of relaxation and peace emanating from the bright white star in the middle of my forehead, as they pass through my trunk, my thighs, my knees, my feet, my toes, my complete body is relaxed. Every cell of my body is vibrating and spreading white rays of peace and relaxation. With your mind's eye, keep seeing this being of light, which is yourself, with the shining bright white star in the middle of the forehead. Just experience this. Gently bring your attention back to the room where you are. And if you close your eyes, gently open your eyes and bring your attention back to the room where you are. Thank you. Let's summarize before we get into Q&A. My perception is my reality. My perception depends on my perspective, and my perspective is a result of my self-talk. Negative self-talk can be transformed. Every situation has two components, the facts in the situation and the story I tell myself about those facts. Because my experience at any given moment to a large extent depends on the story I tell myself, I have the power to change my moment by moment experience by changing the story I tell myself without worrying about changing the reality. I can definitely try to influence the reality, but if I'm not able to change it, I better change the story I'm telling myself. Self talk can change the physical structure of the brain. There's a small typo, please pardon me. And self compassion is the key to self transformation. Good. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us for both the days and spending your valuable time. Good. Over to you, Mukesh, for any questions.
Thank you, Balabai, for the wonderful insights on how the brain reacts and how we must do this at a consistent level to be able to see a change brought about by positive self-talk. Few questions. So I'll be asking the person, Praveen, I have unmuted you. Can you ask your question? You had a question? Hello, Praveen, can you hear us?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for giving the chance to ask the question. I understood that all of these changes will come through self-talk, and but before actually before going through all these practices, I have one more issue that uh, all this internal motivation, how will it come actually? Because right now uh, I feel a lot of difficulty in actually uh, concentrating towards the actual problem. Like right now we already know that we have to concentrate on the problem so that we can bring the attention towards more frontal lobe or the activity towards the frontal lobe. So that is fine. Uh, but that will come only when I'll actually start concentrating on the problem. I generally just lazy out the things and don't think the problem as a problem, and I just let it unresolved. I don't work on it. So, do you have any
Yeah.
solution for this?
Again, good question, which I think good number of us at some point of time in our life also go through this lack of motivation. How I do it for myself is is continuously the two things I do. One, I force myself to do things even if I don't like them. Very, very, very important. In my own experience, what I have understood is there are certain things which we will not like, but we have to do those. And the only way you can do them is by forcing yourself to do them. You will never feel good to start doing them because you dislike doing them. So even if you keep postponing it for 100 years, you will not feel good. And if you wait to start until you feel good, it's never going to happen. So it is better to start it forcefully than waiting to feel good to start. First one, it will be painful. You won't feel good, but force yourself. Because what I have observed is once I force myself, once I start seeing the first experience of the benefit from the task, the resistance starts dropping off more and more and it becomes easier and easier. But initially, I must force myself. Let me give you an example, which again comes from my own childhood. My aunt, um, what she used to do when we were young was, whenever she used to prepare a new dish, she would say, she would put two conditions. Condition number one, she's not going to allow me to go without tasting it. Condition number two is, it's more like a what do you call? She's giving me a pass. The second one is a pass. She says, you can spit it out if you don't like it, but I will not allow you without tasting it. So you must put this half a spoon dish inside your mouth. You don't like it, you spit it out. I will never offer that dish again, but I will not leave you without tasting. And she makes such wonderful food. Even today she makes some really good food. So the first step was the most difficult, so that is why she put her foot down and said, you must taste this. And once I tasted it, to date there is only one chutney that I don't like what she makes, but everything else that she makes I relish. I would have lost that opportunity if she would not have forced me. And I use exactly the same principle from my childhood, even as a manager, as an executive, and even as a person. So that's the point number one. Force yourself. You will never feel good about starting few things. Second one, keep reminding yourself about the cost and about your own responsibility to do that task. Very important. We often, we do not spend time with ourselves, educating ourselves about the cost of our own self-inflicted actions. So that is where again the self-talk comes. You must make time. You must force yourself to sit down. If you come back and say, I don't have motivation, I can't do this, I will not do it until I feel good, the only answer I can give is, I'm sorry, have fun. Because you have to start somewhere. Yes, Mukesh, we can do the next one.
Yeah, I believe that answered the questions. Next question is from Subramaniam KS. Subramaniam, I've unmuted you. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, I'm able to hear. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Om Shanti. And I had already asked this question. I had attended a session in Jakur, so I'm continuing this. But I got your answer through the self-talk thing. I'm just saying, when I have not been successful in career or life for a long number of years due to various reasons, is there a way out to come out of this vicious circle and be successful in life later? And what should I start doing to change this destiny? So anyway, you have explained the self-talk thing. Only thing I feel that it is through practice. I have another question which is related. If I have a partner in life or somebody in family who is very negative, how do you motivate them to, which is affecting me in life very badly? How do you motivate them to, improve themselves and me, because I am also a part of their life. So
Correct. So did they watch this video?
No, sir. Actually,
that's a good start.
Okay.
No, I'm not kidding. In all honesty and modesty, I feel in a non-judgmental fashion, instead of you explaining, when they see somebody else talking about it, hopefully it will start dawning upon them how negative thinking is neither good for their health, their body, their mind, and their relationships.
Okay.
So it's very important that you gently start exposing them to these concepts, not by themselves, but jointly exploring the topic, jointly watching this.
Okay.
And initially, because you said it's the partner, a part of your life, you can force them. But by doing there's nothing wrong if I can use this phrase called emotional blackmail. I do so many things to you, can't you do this thing for me? Can't you watch just 1 hour? Can't we have a look at this? Can't we explore this topic together? That's fine. There's nothing wrong, because you're doing that thing for something positive. So instead of you telling them, you jointly explore, and this needs to be done over a period of time. Very important. Be patient, but continuously keep doing it. And once they start tasting the success, one of those days, naturally, the tube light will switch on, and then they will never look back. And from our side, all the best wishes to you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And just a related question to my earlier question, that is regarding this destiny. If you are probably not very successful, or like recently I've been out of job, so I'm trying to do something of my own, which I feel positive after coming to Brahma Kumaris. Is there any pattern, something which will is there to change, or is there something negative happening? How do I realize it within myself?
See, see, for the few things, it's a very big question, but I'll try to give an answer in a very short manner. Give your hope for the best and be prepared for the worst. That's the principle I've used always in my life to very good effect. Because when you prepare yourself for the worst and you bring down your expectations, then you will be less disappointed. But at the same time, you also need to hope for the best. So it's an and. Hope for the best and be prepared for the worst, so that there is not much disappointment, and you give yourself enough time for you to taste the success. Because if you're impatient, just by being impatient, you will not get a mango tree in 1 week by sowing the mango seed. You have to wait for those 5 years. So be realistic. Try to say how much time it is going to take for you to taste the success, and then give yourself that time. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question. This is coming in from Anupama. Anupama, if you can hear us, you can put across your question.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Balabai, we just spoke about the amygdala and the frontal lobes. I have two questions. How is gut feeling connected to amygdala and frontal lobes, and how do I improve on that? First question. And second question, the situation is negative, and when I'm trying to think positive, am I fantasizing it?
Good question. Let me answer the second question first. If you recall, and even it's there on the slide here, there are two elements in the situation. One is the facts in the situation. If these facts in the situation are negative, you don't have to disregard facts. We never said we have to disregard facts. But while considering the facts, don't try to add your own masala. Because when we try to add that masala, that story becomes even more negative. So while accepting and acknowledging whatever is negative in the situation, I can always safeguard myself, like we discussed yesterday, and create that emotional shock absorber by telling myself that I can overcome this. It is going to be painful. It is not going to be easy, but I can do it. If you heard just a couple of answers I gave, I was saying that initially you have to force yourself, you have to work hard. So even when the situation is negative, while you acknowledge the negativity, you don't amplify the negativity. That's where the self-talk comes. Okay, if I am ignoring the negativity, then I am fantasizing. But when I am acknowledging the negativity and not amplifying it, that is when I feel empowered and motivated to take on the negativity. Make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So that's the second one. So the first one, when you talked about gut feeling, it's not something that is related to amygdala or brain. It has more to do with what we call as intuition. Okay, there is no data in front of you, but somewhere, somehow, based on your past experience, or for whatever reason, you have this feeling that you have to take this road and not that road. So that gut feeling has more to do with your intuition, and you always have a choice where how forcefully you are getting that gut feeling? Is there any data that is based on your gut feeling, or what are the repercussions if you follow that gut feeling without thinking through? So that's the kind of self talk that comes next, once, where you have to decide what is the next step you have to take after the gut feeling. That's where your self talk comes in. And depending on your self talk, again, it will be either your frontal lobes where you are using your logical mind to think, or if you are going to psych yourself up, that is basically your amygdala functioning.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a way where I can improve my gut feeling?
The only way to improve your gut feeling is to keep following your gut feeling and see what is making sense and what is not making sense.
Okay.
The only way to improve
Thank you.
decision making power is to keep making decisions.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's useful also to sit and reflect, because when we sit back, reflect, and we expand our thinking by considering all elements in a situation in a non-judgmental fashion, then the kind of intuition or the solutions that will come up from inside you will definitely be of higher quality than the kind of solutions that come out when you don't think through them and when you don't reflect.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mukesh, any other questions?
Yeah, nothing else.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Good. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks, Mukesh, for hosting all of us.
Thank
We
you,
will see
everyone.
you next Saturday again as a part of the digital wellness session. I hope you folks will get time to join us.
Thank you, everyone. The link for the digital wellness has been put across in the chat. It's on the 21st on Saturday. We look forward for you being engaged with us in our future sessions, also sessions in person. So at the moment, it's happening in webinars. So you can always remain engaged, and we'll let you know on the future programs. I believe these two sessions have been very helpful, and you'll be using it at a practical level in your life, and it should be helpful.
Yeah, and over the next few days, we would love to receive your feedback. And as and when you get a chance to apply some of these principles and get the benefit, we would love to hear back from you. So do drop us an email. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Om
Also,
Shanti.
Shanti, the presentation is available. You can drop a mail to the specified mail ID. It's also available in your chat, bksit.bangalore@gmail.com. So that's it. Thank you. Om Shanti. Thank you for joining, everyone. Om Shanti.